What have I done? Archaeo rasped, holding his brother's glaive. I have broken every compact and promise. I have turned my back on what I am and embraced the void. He shuddered and wailed. O Lord Emperor, I have betrayed all I hold dear. His hate rage ebbing, Rathan found only one answer in the echoing chasm of his heart. Yes. The humming of the spear gently rose and fell in the fading rhythm of Archaeo's secondary heart. Each peak and trough grew longer as life ebbed from him into the stones and the rain. I was weak, he managed. I thought I could protect myself from this. He gestured feebly, and his wings jerked in response. From falling from the path. My arrogance. I believed I was. Believed it. I am sorry, Archaeo, Rathan said, silent tears falling from his eyes, drawing lines and dark smears of blood and soot on his cheeks. I am sorry I was not there to stand with you, turn you from this corruption. No, Archaeo whispered. You share no burden with me, kinsman. I will bear this stigma. He shivered, a drool of blood escaping from his lips. My error. I was weak. Archaeo, no. You were human. He forced a wan smile. Fear not, Rathan. This is our fate. Both of us saw it. Rathan gasped. You knew this would be by my hand? Yes, and so it was. His ruined fingers crossed Rathan's chestplate and touched his brother's cheek. You weep for me? That is all I ask, kinsman. The Emperor will damn me for my folly, and I accept that without question, but you, I ask you to forgive me. I recant, Rathan. Please, forgive me, brother. I forgive you, Archaeo. On our father's grave I swear it. Archaeo gave a shallow, final nod of thanks. That is mercy enough. His eyes fluttered closed, and the spear fell silent. The Adeptus Astartes uphold the greatest virtues of humanity through deeds made to preserve its legacy. Honor, nobility, and sacrifice among the most venerated traits. Though all aspire to earn glory in the name of their chapter, some are destined to tread a path more unconventional and dark in nature. For today, we shall elucidate a true son of the great angel, whose story epitomizes the struggle inherent within his warrior creed. The confidant of the Lord of Death and protege of Lord Commander Dante, Sergeant Rathan. Born on the soil of Sanguinius' homeworld, Baal Secundus, upon the second moon of their celestial body, two boys grew with dreams of becoming angels. The war chief of Axan of the Broken Mesa clan had sired two sons who in his mind would one day inherit his leadership of the tribe, yet the boys would not be deterred from their true goal. Rathan, the oldest son, alongside his younger brother, Archaeo, ventured to the place of Primarch Sanguinius' discovery, Angel's Fall. Alongside groups of initiates, the two boys sought to impress the Angels of Death who watched over their trials, with the most senior of which being the brother sergeant of the Blood Angels' 5th Company, Chorus. Fighting their rivals with short swords, lances and other primitive weapons, the aspirants began to whittle down the unworthy from the choosing. The two boys fought well, as was befitting sons of a war chief, yet Chorus would find Rathan wanting. Arrogant and prideful in his dealings, the oldest brother fought alone and chose not to cooperate with his peers. Challenged by Chorus to defeat his unarmored form in battle, in exchange for his ascension as a Blood Angel, Rathan foolishly heeded the blatant trap of the veteran of 100 wars. Failing to best Chorus in the test, Rathan was ordered to leave in failure, stating that, A man fights alone, he dies alone. That is the way of it. Embarking back to his homeland, Rathan hoped to perish within the sand wastes of his journey, for while his brother Archaeo would ascend as an angel, his return would be a disgrace to his father. The firebrand was reckless and of no use to the tribe should he return, yet during his pilgrimage of the desert, a vision of a glorious angel would visit him. Seeing what he perceived as the visage of the great angel guiding him from his fate to die in the wastes, Rathan would stumble upon a downed Thunderhawk gunship. The aspirants had crashed within a nesting ground during a storm, with Chorus laying unconscious as the successful aspirants stood alone to face the terrible predators of Baal Secundus, the Fire Scorpions. Rallying the boys to slay the Fire Scorpions, alongside his brother and the boys known as Toph and Sakael, they would fight. Slaughtering the queen of the Fire Scorpions, the thralls under its command retreated as Chorus awoke and looked upon the boy who had saved his own life and those of his charges. Learned from Chorus's prior words, the veteran remarked that Rathan the Ready had redeemed himself in the eyes of those that remained. Returning to the fortress monastery of the Arx Angelicum, Rathan and Archaeo were sealed within sarcophagus and underwent their transformation into Astartes. Awakening a year later, their forms were now alien to them as their muscles had burgeoned and stature heightened. Together the sons of Axan had beaten the odds, for they were angels of death now. Yet Rathan would never forget his pledge to his father that he would forever watch over his younger brother, first made following his mother's death during her labor of Archaeo. A promise he would uphold as best he could, not knowing the actions he would one day be forced to commit. Among the relics and armaments of the Adeptus Astartes, none compare to the weapons wielded by their own gene-sires. Forged by their own hands, many have achieved legends that exceed those of the most respected Astartes. Yet among such weapons a rare few were created personally by the Master of Mankind, and gifted to those of his sons who required such accoutrements to face the darkness. The Soul Spear, Frostblade Mjolnir, and even the Black Sword of the Templars all had fables penning their legacies, and among such weapons one was bequeathed to the Great Angel. A weapon crafted of finest gold and tipped with a pearlescent blade, the Spear of Telesto. Gene activated to only those of the bloodline of Sanguinius, this relic of the Imperium's ancient history had been lost for eons until its discovery by an agent of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition. Inquisitor Ramius Steele of the Ordo Hereticus had long aided the Chapter of the Blood in times of campaign and crisis, yet in his clandestine ventures found the ancient weapon in the desecrating hands of the Orc Xenos. Retrieving the weapon from its unworthy looters, Steele would return the relic to the Blood Angels during their campaign on the world of Cybele. Rathan and his mentor Chorus fought upon the Cemetery world against the Wordbearers Legion under strict orders from Commander Dante to hold their position. Their captain Simeon had perished, yet under Chorus's watchful gaze, the Blood Angels fought to prevent further desecration of the holy soil by the hands of the Dark Apostle, Iskavan the Hated. However, with the return of the Spear of Telesto to the Blood Angels, a miraculous interaction would shake the chapter to its core. Chosen by Inquisitor Steele to guard the Spear of Telesto as a stalwart ally of his contingent's recent cooperation, Brother Archaeo did touch the relic, and within the sanctuary of their battle barge, Belus, holy light did emit from its golden form. The brothers of the Fifth Company watched as Archaeo exhibited the visage of his Primarch, his essence infused within his body as the Spear of Telesto activated at his touch. Having repelled the Wordbearers from Cybele, Inquisitor Steele beseeched Archaeo and the sanguinary priest, Sakael, to enact retribution against the fleeing sons of Lorgar. Despite their orders from Commander Dante, the Blood Angels under the command of Captain Ideon had been inspired by the reborn angel's form and resolved to pursue Iskavan the Hated. Traveling to the world of Shenlong, the Blood Angels prepared to face the hated 17th Legion, yet within their own ranks, knew not the intent of their duplicitous Inquisition ally. Veteran Sergeant Chorus
had long been skeptical of any circumstance which might be described as idyllic. Struggle and toil had long jaded his countenance, and at the sight of Acio's seeming transcendence as the reborn angel, Chorus could not let the rejection of their orders to Commander Dante stand. Confronting Inquisitor Steele within his personal quarters, alongside his most trusted battle brothers, Chorus questioned the intent of the agent of the Ordo Hereticus. Offered goblets of wine as a show of friendship, Chorus would make the fatal mistake of allowing Steele to play on his virtue of honor and formality. Within hours, Chorus and his men fell prey to the thrall of the Black Rage, and with their appointment to the Death Company, Brother Rathan could not help but sense foul play within their midst. Deployed to the surface of Shenlong, the Blood Angels laid waste to the Word-Bearers, with Chorus and his Death Company leading the charge into the fray under the command of Chaplain Delos. Facing a hell-brute in battle, Chorus would give his life in service to the Imperium as he incurred a mortal wound against the millennia-old affront to creation. Accio took to the field, wielding the Spear of Telesto, and as its golden light cast upon the battlefield, those not of the bloodline of Sanguinius who were touched by its luminous caress were turned to ash. As battle ebbed, and the Blood Angels routed the remaining Word-Bearers, Rathan watched over his mentor during his last moments of life. Clear-headed, Chorus warned Rathan that they had been betrayed, and that Inquisitor Steele was the cause of his surrender to the Black Rage. Breaching the protocol of command and the sanctity of the dead, Rathan utilized Chorus's armor communication system to forward a message to Commander Dante on Baal. The message detailing the recovery of the Spear of Telesto and miraculous events of Acio's ascension, Chorus's championing of trusting one's own instincts would not be lost on Rathan. Yet the machinations of Steele had already begun, and the providence he now bore clearly as the ascended chosen of Sanguinius protected Steele from scrutiny. The Word-Bearers had been driven back, yet the citizens of Shenlong now abased themselves to their new rulers. Looking upon Accio as a divine being, the Shenlongi people created idols and stitched symbols of the Spear of Telesto to be worn upon their clothing, a custom which even the Astartes would adopt. Rathan looked upon his battle brothers with dismay as symbols of their chapter were replaced with those giving praise and reverence to his brother, as even the holy iconography of the Emperor was cast down by all upon the world. Knowing in his heart that a deception lay at the heart of this most debased heresy, Rathan attempted to sway his brother to the path of humility and duty to their chapter. Spurned by Inquisitor Steele and the sanguinary priest Sir Kyle, with his mentor Chorus's words still echoing in his mind, the eldest son of Axon would not allow such hubris to spread. Accio saw to the creation of a legion of mortals drawn from the populace of Shenlong, and within weeks, 1,000 men would comprise the warriors of the Reborn. Seeking to confront Commander Dante at the head of followers from every successor chapter of the Blood at his banner, Accio resolved to usurp the Lord of Angels and assume command of a united Blood Angel Legion. They would march united to the Maelstrom and enact their blood crusade to purge chaos from the void. With Accio enshrined as Sanguinius Reborn, none would oppose the will of the venerated sons of the Great Angel. Recanting his oath to serve Accio the Blessed, Rathan beseeched the Emperor for guidance and began his plan to sunder this upstart cult. With the message of Rathan finally relayed to Baal, Commander Dante and his stalwart advisor, Mephiston, would dispatch a promising psyker, Epistolary Vode, to ascertain the truth behind the rumors of the Angel Reborn. Meeting with Vode and Captain Galeo upon their vessel, Amareo, Rathan would warn the investigators of the strange transformation of his kin into zealous idolaters. Confronting Accio upon the surface of Shenlong, Vode would instantly perceive the mark of chaos with his witch sight and attack the Blessed. Bolstered by the unseen hand of Inquisitor Steele, the Blood Angels of the Reborn killed every member of Captain Galeo's team before destroying the Amareo in orbit. Rathan's chant to prevent blood being spilled among his brethren had ended in calamity, yet he would not allow for the corruption of his chapter to continue unopposed. As the hand of the greater demon of Tzeentch, Malphalax continued to spin its web of deceit through his chosen herald, Steel, Archaeo would be blinded by the promise of his ascension. His company too pious in their veneration of their Primarch, no matter should his image be made in vain, they too followed Archaeo the Blessed on a war footing against their loyalist chapter opposition. With the death of Librarian Vode, the Lord of Death, Mephiston, felt the loss of his favored pupil and resolved to end further bloodshed, personally. Hailed by sanguinary priest Takyle to meet with Archaeo on the abandoned monument world of Sabian, this barren world, once the site of a great Blood Angels battle, would see to the end of the conflict one way or another. As Rathan escaped his peers and went into hiding, he would disguise himself until the moment to strike would present itself. Confronting Mephiston and his assembled contingent army upon Sabian, Archaeo the Blessed professed his divinity to the Lord of Death. Disgusted at the blatant aura of the Changer of Ways clinging to this false messiah, alike to a cancer, Mephiston demanded a trial by combat to end the charade. Yet as Mephiston drew his venerated force sword, Vitarus, one man would demand to face Archaeo in his stead. Rathan emerged from the assembled ranks of Archaeo's men, for he alone would face his brother in combat. Seeing within this Astartes the immovable destiny that he must face his brother in combat, Mephiston allowed for the brothers to duel. As the assembled Astartes and the warriors of the Reborn watched, brothers in blood and war crossed blades. Drawing Archaeo's blood in the duel, the sight of their chosen harbinger of change brought low by a mere man caused the faith of his men to falter. Sanguinary priest Takyle realized the error of his ways and attempted to confront Inquisitor Steel, yet the pawn of Tzeentch's psychic might would melt his body from within his ceramite. Decrying the death of Takyle to be the work of Lord Mephiston, a bloody battle would erupt upon Sabian. Ambushed by the Word-Bearers under the command of their Warmaster and co-conspirator of Malphalax, Garand, the loyalist Blood Angels rallied to defend themselves. As war raged upon the scarred soil of Sabian, Rathan and Archaeo continued to fight, yet slowly the Blessed's flesh began to mutate. The restrained seed of Tzeentch began to spread, and in his unwillingness to show his corruption to those who followed him, Archaeo fled the field. Given a jump pack to pursue his winged opponent far from the heart of the battle, Mephiston commanded Rathan to finish his task. Dueling Archaeo once more as the Spear of Telesto began to detect the mark of chaos within the reborn angel, the relic rejected the hand that wielded it. Searing the flesh of Archaeo's palm as it fell from his grip, the spear struck the earth of Sabian and planted itself in its soil, spear tip pointed to the heavens. As the fuel in his jump pack drained close to empty, the enraged Rathan, eldest son of Axon, cast down the abhorrent and mutilated form that had once been his brother. As the reborn angel fell from the heavens, the Spear of Telesto shifted to allow its tip to meet the heart of Archaeo as his body plunged through its haft. Reuniting with the soil once more, Rathan held his brother close as the light began to fade from his eyes. Clear-headed and fully aware of his error, Archaeo knew he would be damned by the Emperor, and only wished for his brother's forgiveness. Recanting his trespasses against the Imperium, Archaeo died knowing his brother would end the madness of Malphalax and the Inquisitor Steel. Knowing the avatar of their plot to be slain, Malphalax used Inquisitor Steel's body as the host of its foul corruption and enabled a new plan to the thrall of chaos. Triggering the black rage within the warriors of Mephiston's contingent, the Lord of Death would once more surrender to the rage, and if left unchecked, would cause untold destruction upon his chapter. Returning to the fray, wielding the Spear of Telesto, Rathan banished the form of Malphalax and unleashed its divine power to cast the black rage from the minds of the Blood Angels. The Monarch of Spite and Hierophant of Vicissitude, Malphalax was gone. Steel and his conspirators were dead, and the Word-Bearers and Warriors of the Reborn would be cut down to a man by the restored Blood Angels. Sergeant Rathan had succeeded in stemming the tide of the corruption within his chapter, and even saved the life of the Lord of Death. For though Rathan could never keep his promise to his father to protect his younger sibling, Mephiston saw in him the spark of a pupil worthy of his guidance. Having briefly awakened the Spear of Telesto during the battle, Rathan would return the relic to its rightful place on Baal, and for his service be offered the opportunity to assume the rank of captain to replace the position of Galeo. Yet Rathan would reject such an offer from the Lord of Angels, for he had resolved to earn his position through deeds rather than circumstance. In the wake of the Blood Angel civil war, the chapter stood on the precipice of extinction. Many had perished, and looming in the distance a threat capable of sundering their very homeworld began to muster power in readiness to wash over Baal like a drowning tide. Unwilling to allow the legacy of the Ninth to perish, Commander Dante required a means to restore the chapter's numbers with haste. Accelerated recruitment alone would not be enough, and so Dante tasked several envoys of his chapter to meet with the successors of the Blood with requests to return to the Baal system. Rathan, for his peerless service, was trusted with the most perilous and fractious chapter to entreat, the Flesh Terrors. Long alienated by their peers, the sons of Nisir Amit had already brushed with the dissolvement of their chapter on several occasions, and now stood with only enough Astartes to field 4 battle companies. Already having proven himself to the judgment of the Redeemer of the Lost, Astaroth the Grim, following his return to the Blood Angels chapter, Rathan the Ready was the ideal candidate to sway the Flesh Terrors, as among the few to stay the executioner's axe of the Blood Angels High Chaplain. Meeting with the Flesh Terrors during their own campaign of compliance on the world of Eretane, little would Rathan know the extent to which his first contact of the chapter would soon form an unsteady yet resolute alliance. Veteran Sergeant Knox, a hard man with no flair for artistry, manners, nor protocol, initially refused to allow the Blood Angels to meet with his master. Yet with the continued stubborn refusal to rise to his barbed taunts, Rathan would endure the slights made to his chapter's name. In audience with the Guardian of Rage, Gabriel Seth, Rathan relayed the orders of Commander Dante for the Flesh Terrors to convene within the Baal system. Begrudgingly answering the call of the Lord of Angels, it would not be long before Gabriel sought to undermine his primogenitor chapter. Among all assembled chaptermasters of the Blood, Dante beseeched his kin to tithe a number of their own men to reinforce the Blood Angels chapter. As tensions rose and arguments spiraled out of control, a member of the Ninth's Apothecaries would submit a means to restore their ranks without the need for tithes. Through cloning technologies, Apothecary Caestus would employ a mysterious Adeptus Mechanicus acolyte, Haran Serpens, to unlock the mysteries first attempted by the Raven Guard Legion during the dark days of the Horus Heresy. Though refused such sanction, Caestus toiled to create his new breed of Astartes, and unwillingly allowed for a spider to enter his laboratory. Succeeding in crafting such a being, Caestus brought the creature to the Conclave for analysis. Requiring an example of its strength, Sergeant Rathan and Veteran Sergeant Knox would fight side by side to test the mettle of this Blood Angel's copy. Within the gladiatorial pit of the Arx Angelicum, the two Astartes quickly learned that this new warrior was indeed a potent enemy. Yet as the battle prolonged, rampant mutation overtook the body of the clone. Ending its miserable existence, Caestus would be shunned for his actions, yet hear the whispers of Haran Serpens that a solution was viable. Requiring a drop of the pure blood of Sanguinius, housed within the most precious relic of the chapter, the Red Grail, Caestus would steal the blood of the great angel and begin his new batch of foul creations. Betrayed by Harpens, as he revealed his true identity to be that of the chief apothecary of the Emperor's children, Fabius Bile, the spider unleashed the so-called blood fiends upon Baal as he retreated with his prized sample of Vitae. As the mutants gorged themselves on the blood of the slain Blood Angels, their thirst for more of the great angel's blood would see them desecrate the Red Grail and continue to mutate by consuming its rare power. Realizing the logical conclusion of their rabid foes, Dante, Gabriel Seth, Mephiston, and High Priest Corbulo rallied as many men as possible to defend the holy sarcophagus of Sanguinius. Rathan, alongside the Lord of Death, would stand vigil at the threshold of their Primarch's tomb, and with time face the mutated abomination of the Blood Fiends, the Alpha. Defending the sarcophagus, under the frescoes of ancient legends such as First Captain Raldoron, Rathan the Ready slew the Alpha Blood Fiend after driving the inert blade of Lord Mephiston, Vitarus, through its hearts. The great angel's burial site had been defended, yet now the chapter had suffered even further losses and the most heinous of desecrations. Agreeing to tithe a portion of their chapters to aid in their reconstitution, the successors of the Blood truly understood the price to which the primogenitor had paid as the vanguard of the holy site of Baal and the ever-present threats of the galaxy. Yet such a blatant theft of among their most prized possessions would not go unpunished, and as such, Commander Dante would task Rathan with a mission of utmost importance. In the wake of the desecration caused by the self-styled primogenitor, vengeance would be the only viable response. Commander Dante and Mephiston were required to tend to the wounds incurred on Baal, yet dispatched Sergeant Rathan alongside a contingent of Gabriel Seth's flesh terrors to hunt down the Spider of the 3rd Legion. Venturing to the world of Dynakas 5, the planet swarming with Tyranids bereft of a hive mind to control their insatiable hunger, had doomed the Xenos to repeat the cycle of starvation and cannibalism until their genetic code would disintegrate due to insufficient and mutated biomass. Yet there within the sea of talons and razor-sharp teeth, a facility stood with no trace of Xenos presence. Within the massive laboratory, the Clone Lord toiled alongside his lieutenant, Chain, experimenting on captured Astartes of all manner of chapters. Icons such as the Salamanders, Taurons, Crimson Fists, Raven Guard and Tiger's Argent all were visible upon the prisoner's skin, yet all had watched 100 escape attempts, which each in turn had ended in death. Infiltrating the facility alone, Rathan would be captured and stripped of his armor and weapons. Observing the fate of his unfortunate kin who had been imprisoned for as long as a decade under the Chirurgeon's knife, the blind Longfang of the Space Wolves, Nurhern Vetcher, would explain their defeatist fate. Unwilling to allow the prison of his circumstance to overshadow his duty, Rathan began to plot his escape from the facility, knowing his Flesh Terror and Blood Angel's kin were still hidden and waiting in orbit upon their ship, Nemos. Brought before Chain, the androgynous lab assistant implanted a Tyranid larvae into Rathan's chest, alike to all the Astartes held captive. Spliced with chaos sorcery to allow bile to overwhelm the pain receptors of those implanted, Rathan recoiled in horror as the creature nestled deep within his breast, for should he attempt to remove the larvae, it would release poisons into his bloodstream, which would surely end him. Fabius had attempted to create a new breed of space marines dubbed Astartes Nova Superior, such as Chain, yet revealed to Rathan his ultimate ambition to use the blood of Sanguinius to aid in creating a perfect and compliant clone of the Emperor himself. Breaking free from his constraints, the heresy of such an utterance fueled Rathan's anger to bite at Bile's neck and tear his throat out. Subdued by Chain, Rathan would awaken days later among his peers, and soon after be forced to fight within a gladiatorial arena against his cousin Astartes. Observing with horror that Bile somehow still lived as he watched the sport playing out before him, Rathan would not allow this opportunity for freedom to slip through his grasp. Facing the Doom Eagle, Tarachus in a duel, with rusted and worn armaments, the two would strike back against their oppressors. Managing to reach Chain as Bile retreated from the uprising, the Space Wolf Vetcher slew the Nova Superior, yet would be poisoned by the creature's blade. Freeing the other prisoners, Keelan of the Raven Guard, Nisos of the Taurons, and Lyko of the Crimson Fists, each joined the band of warriors and fought their way to the Clone Lord's personal quarters. Finding a strange Tyranid zoanthrope covered in surgery scars, the Astartes had found the means to which Bile had controlled the larvae mutants and staved off the Tyranid hordes outside the prison. As the creature bowed its head, gesturing for the Astartes to end its life, a bolt round to the head from Rathan's pistol would cause the maggot larvae inside their chests to recoil. Each in turn burrowed to the surface, screaming and disintegrating, and as Rathan wrenched the creature from his flesh, it perished in his hand. Freed from their implanted abominations, the Astartes cornered Fabius Bile, and with a well-placed round of Rathan's bolt pistol, turned the Clone Lord's head into red mist. Injured during the confrontation, the Long Fang had been wounded by the Xyclos Needer of the mad scientist, and in his dying moments, asked Rathan to tell his chapter that he saw his enemy die before being slain. Though as the Astartes looked upon their fell work as the last breath of Nurhan Vetcher left him, 2 more copies of the Spider appeared. The Flesh Tearers and Blood Angels under the command of Sergeant Knox fought their way to Rathan's position. Communicating via the librarian Ceres, the Warriors of the Blood would fend off the encroaching Xenos rabble and managed to reinforce Keelan of the Raven Guard and Taricus of the Doom Eagles. The remaining advance party of beleaguered Space Marines fought the twin Clone Lords, unwilling to allow him to escape justice. Struck by Fabius Bile's fell weapon, the Rod of Torment, Rathan and Leiko experienced the purest and most potent pain they would ever experience, yet with a well-timed tackle, Rathan would end the Spider again by toppling his body into a fluid tank of cryogenics. The remaining copy looked upon the broken and disgusting chirurgeon backpack as it sat immobile upon the torn body of the Tauron Nisos. Attempting to escape, Rathan and Leiko pursued the final remaining form of Fabius Bile to his trophy room. Finding no trace of Bile, Rathan beheld within the rows of weapons and relics a familiar sight, a full set of Blood Angel's armor. Struck by its power fist, Rathan realized too late that Bile was inside the suit, and surmised that the Spider intended to use the armor's identifier markers to allow the Neimos to teleport him within its decks. Following Bile to the roof of the complex, Leiko of the Crimson Fist sacrificed his life to allow for Rathan an opening to attack. Managing to take the stolen blood of Sanguinius from Bile, Rathan knew that unarmored and weaponless, he stood little chance of survival. And so it was that Rathan injected the pure vitae of his Primarch into his heart, and in doing so, was imbued with a portion of the great angel's unimaginable power. Striking at Bile's pilfered armor with just his bare hands, Rathan managed to pummel his stolen helmet into his face, shattering visor glass and ceramite until it pierced the eyes of the Spider. Taking Fabius's teleporter beacon from his possession, Rathan cast the Spider from the peak of the tower into the swarming Tyranids below, for if the fall did not kill him, the innumerable rabid filth would make short work of what survived. Returning to his chapter with the aid of Nox, the Astartes of the Blood, and the surviving band of warriors from the prison, Rathan escaped from Deinachus 5, having achieved vengeance for his chapter fourfold. Yet far away in the dark corners of the galaxy, the true primogenitor continued his malevolent and terrible experiments, and he would not forget the slight made by the Blood Angels this day. Within Rathan coursed the pure blood of Sanguinius, and in his venture to slay the Clone Lord, he had dealt a blow to the maniacal scientist of chaos. Yet as High Sanguinary Priest Corbulo watched over his returned kin, many would wonder what to do with this vessel of the blood. Death Company Chaplain Lamates demanded that Rathan be slain and the blood of their Primarch be returned to the Red Grail with haste. Yet Corbulo had envisioned another means to drain the pure vitae from his body without harming the stalwart sergeant. Within the chapter's precious hall of sarcophagi, Corbulo sealed him within the coffin known as the Touch of Sanguine Dawn. Predating the days of the Horus Heresy in its construction, this casket would allow for the chapter to safely drain the blood of Sanguinius from Rathan, whilst maintaining his own life support needs. Said to have been carried into battle during the Great Crusade, to aid in the recovery of wounded Astartes, the sarcophagus would be a fitting means to heal Rathan's body as it struggled to contain such raw power within his veins. Observed by the Lord of Death, Mephiston, as he slumbered, Rathan endured a spiritual trial. Fighting within a realm of unknown providence against shadowy figures, Rathan would find upon another Astartes of the Blood Angels, who bore peculiar and ancient markings on his warplate. Calling himself Meros, the apothecary of the supposed 9th Legion had been injured by Drukhari raiders and himself been interred within the Touch of Sanguine Dawn, millennia prior to heal his wounds. Finding themselves to be capable of slaying the spectral figures if they worked together, Rathan would soon realize that he too had long known the name Meros intimately. The gene seed that he bore had been passed down to generations of the Blood Angels, and Rathan had remembered each venerated name who had bore it within their flesh. He fought alongside his ancient forebear within this miasma of shadows, and under the watchful gaze of the being known as the Sanguinor, the two staved off their inner demons. Returning to the material realm, healed from his trials and separated from the blood of the great angel, the Red Grail would be restored to its former glory. Speaking with Mephiston and learning that he truly was vindicated through his actions, Rathan mused as to the meaning of his interaction with the long-dead martyr of the Blood Angels Legion. Returning to his chapter for his next assignment, Rathan the Ready continues to fight for his kin and the legacy of the great angel to this day. For under the stewardship of the Lord of Death, and ever faithful to the will of the Lord Commander, Rathan shall stand defiant against the darkness and its untold trials.
"Blood Angels," he cried, "sons of Baal, hear me. The lie has been dispelled, our twisted fate undone. Know this, brothers, we have been betrayed."
The conflict raged on, but Rathan's voice still reached every corner of the fight, even the helots and the enemy turning to cast an ear toward him.
"All of us hold the blood of Sanguinius inside our hearts," Rathan called. "Every man of us is the pure one in some small corner of his soul. But our primogenitor, our lord and founder, he lies dead." The word thundered across the sky. "Sanguinius is ashes, millennia gone, no bones, no heart, only blood. Sanguinius died at the hands of hated Horus, perished at the blade of chaos." Angry howls bubbled up from the throats of all the Blood Angels. To a man, all of them stirred to violence by the stark truth of Rathan's statement. "And now the archfoe seeks to turn us all, to drag us to their blasphemy by a false idol." He held up Archeo's body, high above the throng. "See, look what has been done. My blood kinsman, mutated and warped by the hands of a traitor." Rathan's voice was choked with emotion. "They made us believe, but he was corrupted, poisoned by the pawn of steel. The demon that walks among you did this, so we would follow blindly into the abyss." A chorus of denial came up to Rathan on the wind, anguished refusal from his men who now saw the lie they had granted fealty to. "See the truth!" Rathan screamed. "See my brother fall!" He tipped Archeo's corpse over the edge and let gravity take the winged body from him. In a moment of terrible silence, only the rain spoke as the dead man tumbled end over end, ruined wings flapping, to land in a broken heap on the cathedral steps. "Archeo is dead," came the cry from the tower. "My brother perished for this mendacity, and it dies with him." Rathan drew the spear of Telesto and let the weapon's golden light haze the sky around him. "By the Holy Lance, reject your flawed allegiance to Archeo, and remember the true Lord, Sanguinius." He pointed the weapon into the melee and felt it turn hot with willing power. "See the foe among you, and destroy them." This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. Though not all Astartes of note ascend to the lofty ranks of captain, castellans, or chapter masters, many of more humble rank have eked out legacies of legendary renown.
each line Astartes undertakes the duty of their chapter and upholds the legacy of their bloodlines. For remember, alike to Wrath and the Ready, that your station among your peers does not preclude you from glory. And should you remain stalwart in your convictions, you shall achieve great things, no matter your station.